In the past couple of weeks, we have seen the indictments of former FBI Director James Comey, the indictment just a few days ago of the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. You called this in your book Trump's vengeance agenda.
Before it even happened.
Before it happened.
Yes.
You've predicted this. You seem like saying I told you so, but this is one of those things that you predicted.
Yeah.
You were an Attorney General of the second largest DOJ in the country, second only to the United States DOJ. What does what we're seeing mean for the rule of law in this country?
This is a full-on frontal attack on the rule of law in our country. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about during those 107 days and even before was that the Supreme Court, during the course of the election cycle, made the decision, as you'll recall, that the president would be immune from any of his conduct while in office. So we went into the election with this individual, Donald Trump, knowing that he would essentially be immune from any consequence for misbehavior while in office. So the Supreme Court basically gave him that. You look at what's happening in terms of the militarization of the streets of America, deploying people, men and women who have been trained to fight our adversaries or to do other important work that is about uplifting the well-being of the American people, being sent to the streets of America like here in Chicago. You look at what's happening in terms of the weaponization of the Department of Justice, to your point, going after Comey, going after the Attorney General of the state of New York, who a previous prosecutor, who I'm told was a conservative Republican, reviewed the evidence and decided that there was not enough facts to charge her with a crime, and she has been indicted. And what we see is that the rule of law is very much under attack by this president, who thinks that the Department of Justice is his personal lawyer and is basically subverting the will of the people around constitutional safeguards. I think that we also have to recognize that the district court judges, some of whom were even appointed by Trump and Democrats, but Republicans and democratically appointed judges in the district courts, are standing up. And I think that is something that we should recognize and praise, that they are saying that where there's an abuse of power, they're going to stand firm. But we also see everyday people and their constitutional rights being trampled, whether it be Fourth, Fifth, or Sixth Amendment rights. So this is a real issue and a serious issue. And the people, I think, are speaking through their vote and their voice to say they're not going to stand for it.
You mentioned the Attorney General, and Trump messaged her. He thought he messaged her, but he sent it out to everyone. I'm assuming you saw that, calling for...
Yeah, I hear that he must have DM'd her and didn't realize everybody would see it.
Yeah, everyone was a little surprised by it, including himself, apparently. But he called for the Comey and the James indictments. Your fellow Californian, Adam Schiff, is on that list. So right now he's of 2 of 3. Do you believe that these are about getting convictions, or is it actually about sending a message to anyone who might speak out against him to make clear to folks that they shouldn't do it because there might be consequences?
I think he has a vengeance campaign, which is, I think, really exposing the petty nature of who he is and his deep level of insecurity, that he feels that he has to use the power of the federal government and the United States Department of Justice to go after people who have disagreed with him, or as prosecutors who have used a combination of the facts and law to prosecute him. From everything I know, Attorney General James based a conviction, or she didn't convict them, but based her charges, which was then resulted in a conviction, based on facts in the law. But he can't take that. He can't take the fact that he's been held accountable, and so he is on a vengeance campaign.
Yeah. What the DOJ does, and you know this better than I do, is so fundamental to the backbone of the country, right?
Yeah.
The rule of law versus the rule of men. Can Americans trust the criminal justice system right now and what's coming out of the DOJ?
I don't know if we can trust what's coming out of the Department of Justice right now. And that pains me to say that as someone who spent the majority of my career as a prosecutor, where the work of a prosecutor should be to do justice. Many who have worked as U.S. attorneys, worked for the U.S. Department of Justice, talk openly and rightly about the fact that they should do their work without any fear and not in the interest of favor. And that so clearly is not what is ruling the day there. And when you have an administration and individuals who are manipulating the justice system of America in that way, they best understand that this is not only about something that affects the individuals that they're targeting. This affects all of us who believe that, flawed though it may be, that a justice system is actually supposed to be blind. In the way that it does its work, not targeting people because of who they are, or for that matter, what they look like.
During your DC events this week, you said that you encourage civil service folks to stay in their jobs.
Yes.
To help, as I think as you put it, to kind of clean up after Trump, whatever that is and whenever that means. But for the folks in the DOJ, where this vengeance campaign is happening, you see Eric Siebert, who was in Virginia, leaving because of other pressure, lots of other folks, because they can't take it. How can they possibly stick it out? How do they actually do that? What's your advice to them?
Well, like I said that day, I can't pretend to tell them what to do based on what is important to them. But I will speak on behalf of what I believe is important to the country. And if they can stay and stick with it, I would implore them to do it for the sake of the country. It is important that we have people in these powerful positions who understand rules of ethic, the rule of law, the fact that they should be there working on behalf of the people, not some personal political goal. So I do encourage, and it's not only people in the Department of Justice, people at the FDA, people in the Department of Health and Human Services. People are being pushed out or made to feel as though they can't actually do the job that they ethically know that they should do, and are being pressured in that way to the point that if they can't do the job that they care about, they're thinking about leaving. But then who does that leave? Who's left?
You also said in your book tour over and over that Democrats need to fight fire with fire.
Yes.
Should the next Democratic president change the way they deal with the DOJ? Should they be a little bit more involved than Democrats have been in the past? Does that include?
No president should think of the Department of Justice as being their personal attorney. No president should try to influence prosecutorial decisions based on a political agenda. Period.
You also write in the book about that warning in that last speech on the lips. I was there, where you said he would use the military to go after American citizens.
Yep.
We're here in Chicago, one of the cities he's trying to. The courts have stopped him to send the National Guard in. Just today, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said Trump has declared war on Chicago and other cities. Do you agree? Has the President of the United States declared war on cities run by Democrats in this country?
Well, let's just look at the facts and then draw your own conclusion. He is deploying U.S. military to the streets of America, a military that has been set up, stood up, and trained, for the most part, to do the work of fighting against adversaries, fighting against enemies, and deploying them on the streets of America as though, and he said it, to attack the enemy within. Here in Chicago, I'm told that the helicopters that were descending on an American city were Blackhawks.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what Blackhawks were designed to do?
War, yeah.
War. So I think everyone can draw their conclusions just based on the facts and see that he has definitely decided he's going to use the power of the federal government to attack American cities and the people who live there.
What did you make of him saying and telling these generals and admirals, military leaders, a couple of weeks ago to use the cities as training grounds?
I think it's outrageous. I think it's outrageous, and any military leader that you speak with who has been there and taken an oath and served in combat will tell you that the idea that these men and women who sacrifice so much to enlist and to serve in our military forces would turn on American citizens for sport or training is completely against every reason that they signed up to serve our nation and to protect our nation.
When this airs, President Trump will be on his way to the Middle East. They have this deal between Israel and Palestine. Both former Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and Antony Blinken have commended President Trump for the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Do you agree with them? Should he be commended?
Look, I don't think that we should hold in credit where it's due. I mean, first of all, let me say about that deal, I really do hope it becomes real and that the hostages are out, that Gaza is no longer being treated with such brutality of force, that aid goes in. And I commend the people who have been a part of this process. I'd commend the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the president.
A lot of folks in your party have called what's happening in Gaza a genocide. Do you agree with that?
I think that, listen, it is a term of law that a court will decide, but I will tell you that when you look at the number of children that have been killed, the number of innocent civilians that have been killed, the refusal to give aid and support, we should all step back and ask this question and be honest about it. Yeah.
In the afterword of your book, you say, I'm going to get this right, in this critical moment, working within the system by itself is not proving to be enough. I will be with the people in towns and communities where I can listen to their ideas on how we rebuild trust, empathy, and a government worthy of the ideals of this country. As someone who's covered you for a long time, your kind of estimation that the system is not working so much so that you're ready and willing to step out of it was kind of surprising to me and a lot of folks who know you. What does that actually look like after the book tour? You're being outside, listening to the ideas of folks. How do you get around and talk to these people?
Well, it's been, actually, I've been doing it along with the book tour and not with the press present, but convening folks to talk with them and mostly, really mostly to listen. I think the American people have a lot to say right now about how they are feeling and what they want from their leadership. And I hope that I can use this time to be able to do that listening and to lift up those voices. You know, one of the issues that I have talked about even on the stage is the level of fear and frustration that the American people are feeling. The level of distrust that is existing, distrust in the system and their government, but also distrust in each other as fellow Americans. And I think there's some deep work that we have to do that includes lifting up those voices toward a solution. I don't think, as I write in the book, I don't think all the solutions are going to come out of D.C.
So how do you fix that trust, right? Because you have said that we are working with different sets of facts, right? That there's, in this world that we're living...
No, I would say different information.
Different information.
Fact is fact.
That's true. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So different information. We're all working with different information in this country. And so how do you get that trust back with MAGA Republicans, for example?
I don't want to put anyone in a general broad group of people, because if you're talking about, for example, people who elected and voted for Donald Trump in the last election, I do believe that there's a fair number of people who did because they trusted and believed that he would, as he said he would, on day one, bring down prices, which he did not. He lied. The cost of food is higher, unemployment is higher, inflation is higher. And so when I think about a population of people that just believed and wanted that, I think the work to be done is about talking about our plans for addressing that and doing so immediately. Part of what I've talked about is I think if we had to do it over again, we should have really considered the family care piece of our Build Back Better agenda before we dealt with infrastructure and chips. we could have gotten to that, but dealing with extending the child tax credit with paid leave, affordable child care would have met the immediate needs of the American people. In fact, that's why during the 107 days, that was my platform, to actually address some of the immediate needs, like, for example, getting Medicare to cover home health care for people who need it, including those in the sandwich generation who are raising young children and taking care of their elderly parents.
I want to get to some news that just came out today with President Biden. His spokesperson said that he is going to now start doing radiation for his prostate cancer. Have you talked to him about it?
I called him earlier.
How's he doing?
I have not talked to him. I just left him a message after I heard the news. I was otherwise on the event at the event. I think Joe Biden is a fighter, and that is what I told him and left him a message. He's a fighter, and he's going to fight this. And we're going to hold him up and pray for his recovery and for his strength and for his family.
You write about him a lot in the book. Have you talked to him about the book?
Yes.
Yeah. What'd he say?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, come on. It's just you and I.
Yeah, right.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
It is Sunday, October the 12th. I'm Ali Velshi, and we begin this hour with a dangerous new disinformation campaign coming from the White House, one that's playing a crucial role in accelerating the authoritarian slide that we're witnessing unfolding in real. Storytelling is central to consolidating the kind of power that it takes to build an authoritarian regime. And right now, Donald Trump is telling a story about crime, danger, and violence to justify a massive power grab and a brutal crackdown on dissent. He's ordered unwanted, unwelcome, unneeded, and legally dubious National Guard deployments to cities that are run by Democrats like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, Oregon, claiming the streets of those American cities are war-ravaged by crime, equating protests there to insurrection, and calling for the jailing of their leaders for standing in the way of his crackdown. After the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the president released a video condemning political violence. But instead of calling for calm across the board, he blamed only the radical left, highlighting incidents of violence against conservatives while conveniently omitting a long list of recent attacks on Democrats, judges, and government workers. Telling only half the story was no accident. It was a deliberate attempt. Trump is crafting a narrative in which the radical left is portrayed as inherently violent, dangerous, and illegitimate.
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem. And they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy.
Why make the case that violence is only on one side? It seems to be taking place.
I didn't say it's on one side, but I say the radical left causes tremendous violence, and they seem to do it in a bigger way. But the radical left really is caused a lot of problems for this country. I really think they hate our country.
Who do you hold responsible for the uptick in left-wing violence in the country?
Radical left rhetoric. The radical left is causing the problem. The radical left is causing this problem. Not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them. I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left.
Now, once enough of the public buys into that premise that a sinister and calculating radical left is to blame for violence and crime and unrest, it becomes far easier to rationalize extraordinary measures to silence, monitor, or punish people on the left. And that's the next step in turning radical left violence from a mere talking point into a political weapon. A dangerously cynical strategy that lumps together a broad spectrum of people who oppose Trump's policies, Democrats, judges, lawyers, journalists, campus organizers, even public health workers, into a single enemy bloc. If you recast criticism and protest and journalism as elements of a violent fringe movement, you lay the rhetorical groundwork for crackdowns that once seemed unthinkable. Just as Joseph McCarthy's accusations of communism justified blacklists and loyalty oaths in the 1950s, or the Palmer raids of the 1920s swept up labor organizations and immigrants under the guise of national security. Those chapters are now remembered as some of the darkest stains on American democracy, moments when fear was weaponized to silence dissent, when innocent people lost their jobs, their reputations, even their freedom for nothing more than their beliefs. History judges those episodes harshly because they revealed how fragile democracy becomes when the state is allowed to decide which ideas are dangerous. And yet, that same playbook is now being dusted off, this time under the banner of radical left violence. As the author and journalist Thom Hartmann writes, quote, "The newest big lie for 2025 is that America is racked by radical left violence, leading to the disintegration of law and order in our cities. They're using this to censor speech, to ban comedians and commentators, to prosecute people, including lifelong Republicans who've spoken out against Trump, violently attack protesters, justify the monopolization of our media by right-wing billionaires. They're using far-left violence as their excuse to dismantle our rights, impose soldiers on our cities run by Democrats, and pour your tax dollars into extreme policing and militarization of our society," end quote. This strategy's been brewing for years. There were the alt-left after Charlottesville, the radical left during the 2020 George Floyd protests, and on the campaign trail, Trump referred to his political enemies as vermin and radical left lunatics. Now, with the phrase radical left violence repeated ad nauseum, it's become a blueprint for targeting the left, culminating in false claims of a shadow network funding violence that the federal government must supposedly root out. Now, here's how this looks in practice. Agency propaganda. The Housing and Urban Development homepage ran a bright red banner blaming a looming government shutdown on the radical left. It's not housing policy. That's reinforcing a lie on a taxpayer-funded website. Executive overreach, an order purported to designate Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, even though, for better or for worse, U.S. law doesn't provide any legal mechanism to designate domestic groups, and Antifa isn't actually a formal group. It's got no membership, no address, no representatives. It's a loose, leaderless affiliation. A follow-on directive told DOJ, DHS, Treasury, and even the IRS to prioritize investigations into alleged networks and scrutinize progressive nonprofits' tax-exempt status. Translation? Attach the stigma of terror to civil society and turn ordinary compliance tools into instruments for policing speech. The dangerous shift from rhetoric to force. The White House has leaned on National Guard deployments in Democratic-led cities and even flirted with invoking the Insurrection Act, casting dissent-heavy jurisdictions as war zones. And once speech is branded as terror, the barrier against using extraordinary force begins to crumble. In just a matter of weeks, the White House and its allies have gone from smearing the left in the abstract to directly naming and targeting cornerstone liberal funders and institutions. Above all, George Soros's Open Society Foundation, but also the Ford Foundation, threatening them with investigations, RICO charges, and even the loss of their tax-exempt status. Their goal is to hobble the left's operating system, the network of grant makers and nonprofits that underpins things like voting rights, immigrant legal aid, reproductive health care, climate and racial justice work, civic education, and journalism. If you can freeze the funders and tie up the grantees, you starve the entire field. The First Amendment protects speech, including offensive speech. Government can punish violence and true threats. It cannot punish beliefs. Let me repeat that. It cannot punish beliefs. When officials imply that criticizing the president is incitement or that supporting a cause makes you part of a terror network, they're not keeping you safe. They're policing thought. They're consolidating power. Once speech equals violence for the outgroup, you can justify almost anything: blacklists, loyalty tests, surveillance, dragnets, even troop deployments under the banner of restoring order. The target started with college students, but the dragnet has steadily widened. Republicans who've broken with Trump, virtually any Democrat, academics whose research or teaching challenges his agenda, reporters whose stories cut too close, lawyers and judges and organizations focused on immigrants' rights, reproductive rights, voting rights. The label continues to expand until it sweeps in almost anyone even mildly critical of the government. And that is the hallmark of authoritarianism. If you had the luxury of looking the other way when college students, whose opinions perhaps you didn't share, were being targeted, remember that fact. The label expands because people look the other way. And if you think characterizing the work of nonprofits as radical is not a big deal, you should know that people inside that sector are already adapting, sometimes in ways that prove that a chilling effect is fully underway. Ashley Subramanian Montgomery, who advises nonprofits, warns that some groups are removing content from their websites that could make them targets. She warns that even the threat of defunding could cause people to start self-censoring, then change programming completely, saying, quote, then there wouldn't even be a civil society to push back on government policy, end quote. We have seen this before in America. From McCarthy's maps of imagined subversives to Red Scare flowcharts linking unions and civil rights leaders and newspapers. But today's danger is the speed and scale of this disinformation ecosystem. Radical left violence is the new disinformation banner under which the ambitions of a strong man are marching. Government has a compelling interest in stopping violence, but it has zero mandate to criminalize ideas. The line between punishing crimes in which we, the people, and our government share an interest and punishing viewpoints is not pedantry. It's the guardrail between a free society and one where power decides who may speak and when.
Joining us now, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who has said Trump's troop deployments in his state are not legally justified. Attorney General, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's start with your reaction to the appeals court ruling.
Well, we're obviously pleased. We don't want the National Guard on our streets. The court's ruling denied a request for emergency stay, for administrative stay on deployment, which while they allowed for the federalization, they denied the deployment, which is the more important thing, that effectively the National Guard won't be on our streets. And I think it's important. I think Judge Perry, I spent some time late Friday and yesterday reading her opinion, and she goes back to the origin of this country where our founders said it would be unimaginable, and it's inflammatory to suggest that a president would ever send the militia of one state into another. Well, we're here.
Mr. Attorney General, the reasoning that the president is using to do this in all of these cities is that there's this terrible crime. And sure, there's crime in cities, there's crime in towns and townships, little villages all across the country. That is a thing that we live with as human beings. But I want you to fact check a claim from President Trump this week, which is that 4,000 people were murdered in Chicago over a very short period of time. He said that on Friday. You tell me if I'm wrong. I think you know this better than I, but there were 331 homicides that have been recorded in this city in 2025 so far, and 2024 was the third consecutive year that homicides decreased. That's according to the city of Chicago. What is the president talking about? What are the 4,000 people who were murdered over a very short period of time in Chicago?
Well, the president does not have a good relationship or familiarity with the truth. While one homicide is one too many, the law enforcement on the local level, actually in partnership with federal law enforcement, FBI, DEA, ATF, has done a good job over the years of decreasing the number of homicides. And so the president's representation is just so far from the truth. It's important to note that Judge Perry, in making her decision, looked at credibility, and there were three things that were being alleged. One, that certain individuals were being violent towards DHS personnel, and charges were brought against those individuals, and grand juries declined to indict on those charges. And another thing that was alleged was that there was a request for National Guard to protect the courthouse, and the chief judge, federal judge, came out and said that that was not true, and they had to backtrack on that. And then finally, one of the leaders of ICE said that things were uncontrollable outside of the Broadview facility, yet that same individual had emailed the state police saying that local police were doing a great job of controlling things. So they just have bad relationship with the truth.
Attorney General, one of my biggest concerns with the Trump second term has always been the potential of him invoking the Insurrection Act. I've talked about this with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison multiple times, including yesterday on the show. And I'm bringing it up now because this past week, we have heard the President of the United States discuss it publicly. Watch this.
The Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. Yeah, well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple.
When I talked to A.G. Ellison back in May, he said, unprovoked, that invocation of the Insurrection Act was the ultimate goal of President Trump. And if that were to happen, that's the whole ball game. Do you share that same concern? And what, if anything, could you do as the Attorney General of Illinois to push back against something like that?
Well, the same thing that we did last week. We challenge it in court. You know, one of the things, there is no insurrection. And similarly, there were three preconditions to federalizing the Guard. One, whether there was a foreign invasion. Two, whether there's a rebellion, which, tracks a little bit along with the notion of an insurrection. The lawyer for the federal government indicated that the president is above judicial review on his ability to federalize and deploy the Guard, and while the judge recognized that the president does get much deference, she said he's not entitled to his own facts, and so he's not entitled to just determine out of whole cloth that the conditions exist when they don't. The preconditions exist when they don't, and so the same thing would apply to the Insurrection Act.
Attorney General, the conditions might not exist, but we had former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson on the show yesterday, who said that while he doesn't agree with the tactics or the strategy being employed by the Trump administration here, he does think and predict that when this makes its way up to the Supreme Court, that they're going to uphold and authorize the president's actions here. If we end up in a situation where National Guard are in American cities for an undetermined amount of time, which is actually what's already happening in our city, in Washington, D.C., what will places like Chicago, what will you be doing? Well,
I mean, Chief Justice Roberts said to some Georgetown law students last May that the rule of law is under threat, and he, in the same speech, said that folks need to enhance their civics education. We have to rely on the people at that point, and we've been relying on the people much in Chicago right now. People have been out with their phones videotaping some of the outrageous acts coming from the hands of ICE and Border Patrol, and I think the American people at large disapprove of the tactics that have been being used, and I'm hopeful. I think we have a pretty strong record if this is elevated to the Supreme Court. I would note that the Seventh Circuit, again yesterday, denied the request for a stay, and that's significant. This is First Circuit to do so.
We'll continue to follow this story because there's a lot more to come. Illinois Attorney General Ron Rule, thank you so much for coming on the weekend.
It's day 11 and counting of the government shutdown, and President Trump is making good on his threat of mass federal workforce firings. On Friday, Trump's budget chief, Russell Vought, said reduction in force plans have started, with court filings saying the agency intends to lay off more than 4,000 employees. Now, that's in addition to the 750,000 workers expected to be furloughed during the shutdown.
It'll be a lot, and we'll announce the numbers over the next couple of days. And I must tell you, a lot of them happen to be Democrat-oriented. These are people that the Democrats wanted that in many cases were not appropriate. These are largely people that the Democrats want. Many of them will be fired.
Joining us now is New Mexico Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. She's a member of the Oversight and Natural Resources Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us, especially on a Saturday. I want to ask you, though, how long you think Democrats can stay united on this and on message as the shutdown drags on, Americans really start to feel the impact and start calling up their lawmakers?
Well, I think it's really important that, first of all, Republicans come back to work, because Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has shut down the House. He has canceled votes for 2 weeks in a row, and he was refusing to bring his members back to Washington, D.C. And so it's really important that people understand that Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so it is in their hands to end the shutdown. So we're 11 days in. We know that in a few days, our troops, our civilian military, and many of our federal workers are going to miss their first paycheck. And I think the Republicans are going to really feel the pressure of that. And we're also going to see that people start receiving notices of what their insurance premiums are going to be in healthcare. And it's just not a sustainable position. They need to come back to work. They need to cut a bipartisan deal, and we need to reopen the government.
I mean, Democrats seem to think you have the upper hand in the shutdown messaging battle, holding firm on the things you were just talking about, Affordable Care Act subsidies being extended, et cetera. But how do you respond to the president saying he's going to focus layoffs on Democratic-leaning agencies or agencies that have more Democrats in them?
Well, first of all, let me say that this is not a game. I know that the Republicans are treating this like this is some sort of political gamesmanship, but for us, this is about human life and dignity. Access to healthcare is a human right, and we are fighting to make sure that millions of Americans do not lose access to health insurance and to healthcare. And so they can play as many political games as they want, but this comes down to reopening the government and addressing the healthcare for millions of Americans. Democrats are completely united on this front. And I think that, Republicans are going to continue to hear from the outrage of the American people that this is not what they voted for. It's not what they want. And they have the power to bring everyone back, to cut a deal and reopen the government. Now, in terms of the mass firings, the president and Russell Vought do not have any special authority to fire any federal workers during a shutdown. In fact, it is unprecedented. I agree with your previous guest. And in fact, there was a preemptive lawsuit filed by the unions the day before the shutdown, illustrating all of the ways in which they do not have the authority to do these mass firings. And if they think that this is a threat that they can hold American people hostage over, they've got another thing for me.
I want to talk a little bit more about those Obamacare extensions, because you are getting some Republicans who are pushing for a one-year extension of those tax credits, including an unlikely usual Trump ally, and that's Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She broke with Trump and the GOP on a couple of issues in recent months, calling the situation in Gaza a genocide and signing on to the discharge position to release the Epstein files. I want to play an exchange between you two during a DOJ subcommittee hearing back in June.
I'm the chair of this committee.
That's not how
I'm the chair.
Parliamentary procedure works.
You're not recognized, Ms. Stanbury.
You're not recognized either. You can't just speak anytime you want.
I'm the chair of this committee.
That's not how it
Ms.
works.
Ms. Stansbury, you're not
Madam
recognized.
Chairwoman, that is not how
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
All day, but that's not how
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
We're going to get you a Robert's
Ms.
Rules of
Stansbury,
Order
you're not.
Point of order.
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
Capitol Hill. All right. With that in mind, I want to know what you make of her staking out positions that are sometimes more aligned with Democrats.
Hey, you know what? If somebody's on the right side of an issue, I'm all for it. And the fact that she has had the only backbone we've seen so far in this battle to go on national television with the press and say Republicans caused the shutdown, her leadership is the people who are perpetrating it, and that they created a problem by breaking the Affordable Care Act and their big ugly bill, and it's going to affect millions of Americans. She is 100% correct, and I fully support the position that she's staked out. So I'll just say this, I'm proud of her.
I also want to ask you, House Speaker Mike Johnson's refusal to call the House back in session has has stalled the swearing in of Democratic Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva. Grijalva won an Arizona special election over 2 weeks ago and is this crucial 218th signature on the petition to force a vote to release the Epstein files. I mean, we were just talking about the Epstein files. Johnson blames the government shutdown for that delay. What do you say to that?
I mean, come on. Mr. Speaker, you literally control the House. You control the floor schedule. There have been multiple pro forma sessions since the shutdown started 11 days ago. 3 Republican members of Congress have been sworn in during pro forma sessions. He is refusing to swear her in, and he blatantly lies to the American people and gets on national television and says he can't do anything until the shutdown's over. Well, it is completely in his court to bring the House back, to bring his members back, to reopen Congress, to get the votes going again, and to swear in Adelita. And let me just say this. We have already subpoenaed the Epstein files, and the president is not complying with the subpoena. And so he can't hide from this forever. She will be sworn in. She will be that 218th signature, and our investigation will continue.
Congresswoman, this is not our first shutdown, but it could be a long one. How long do you think this is going to last?
You know, that is fully within the Republicans' power. I was working at the Office of Management and Budget during the Obama administration when that shutdown happened. But here's the thing that is fundamentally different. If you want a bipartisan pathway forward to reopen the government, you have to physically be there working, talking, negotiating. And the fact that Republicans are refusing to even bring their members back to have those conversations, and in fact, are silencing them. They're telling them, don't talk to the media, don't do anything stupid, don't ruin the message, indicates to us that they want the shutdown. They think they can leverage and hold the American people hostage and federal workers, and that they are unwilling to take basic action to get us out of this. So, you know, that's why it's really important that Americans speak up, speak out, call your member of Congress, and track them down if they haven't showed up to Washington. We're going back next week. Every Democrat in the House will be back next week because we're there to fight for the American people.